Being from representing northeastern Newfoundland, I represent the town of Bonavista, which was one of the first places discovered, the first place discovered in North America. Well over 500 years ago now. And the reason why they stayed was the fish, and the reason why they stayed was the sea. As the town of Catalina, my riding would say, their motto is, the sea is our stay. Well, the sea is our stay, and it certainly was our beginning. And whether you talk about fish, seafood, or you talk about oil and gas, for many people, yes, the sea is our stay. So how do we make a living from that sea? We are changing. The dynamics are changing. People with smaller boats are getting bigger boats. But the tools and the mechanisms by which that Department of Fisheries and Oceans implement these programs sometimes can go awry. They may be paved with good intentions, but unfortunately, potholes are developed along the way. Now, as parliamentarians, we have that responsibility to help fill potholes. I mean this in a figurative sense too, not necessarily literal. Well, maybe literal if you got potholes. It's always a big issue. But one of the issues addressed in the speech from the throne hinted about the possibility of a new mechanism for fisheries, and it reads as this. In the speech from the throne, the Governor-General, or the government, said it will introduce new legislation to reform Canada's outdated system of fisheries management. Fisheries Act. We dealt with it twice. C-32. I think that was a number. There were two in the past. Let's put it that way. C-45. Thank you. The problem was, it was what some people will call an omnibus legislation, a very large piece of legislation that changes a 130-year-old act, actually 134 years now, I believe, if not 135. The act is old, it needs to be changed. I don't think anybody in this House disagrees with that. But when you change an act of this size, with so much power, because there's so much discretionary power rested within the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans, this is a pretty big step. Co-management was a key factor in that new Fisheries Act. But you got to do this right. There were a lot of people just weren't sure about this act, and boom, there it was, right here in the House of Commons. And people were asking questions because, well, you know, we talked to fishermen about this. You need more than just fishermen. We need lawyers to look at this too. And we need people who are former managers who came out with this and said, you know, there are some things in here that cause concern, but there just wasn't time. The government says there was a consultation process. We decided that the consultation process was not thorough enough. And therefore, that's why we worked against it at the time. Now, I would suggest to the government, if this is your plan, the new Fisheries Act is coming, and you want to do this, I would humbly suggest that you take measures to have consultations, but only about a new Fisheries Act from coast to coast to coast before you put this legislation on the table. Or, further to that, you can put it in the House, put it to committee before it goes to second reading, because therefore you can change the act, it's wider in scope. Because if you go to second reading and you vote on it, and we accept it, all of a sudden it goes to committee, there's some changes that you want to make, but you can't, because the Speaker would overrule it. And it's not because you're a nasty person, sir. It's only because that's your job. So don't think we think lowly of you. We think much highly of you. But you get the idea. That is where we need to go with a new Fisheries Act. The other thing I would suggest with a new Fisheries Act is there are 3 or 4 major parts to this act. And the problem with that is, you may not like with one thing, but you have to discard the whole thing because you're voting on the whole thing. You have one vote to do the whole act. What they should do is to break it up into a management section, one bill. To deal with infractions, a tribunal, second bill. And you get the idea. That is certainly the way we should be progressing. I am not against co-management, but I am certainly in favor of everyone buying into this and everyone truly understanding what a new fisheries regime must bring to the table.